now my mind is blown. No surprise, guess I should have known. Oh, now my mind is blown. No surprise, guess I should have known. You got control of me, break my barricades. Walls are crumbling, grounds they shake. You came to save, but it's way too late. Every single time you stay, I cave.
We are exploring what it means to be neurodivergent in a neurotypical world and how we can help each other navigate it. I'm your host, Deanna Brakefield, neurodivergent entrepreneur, mom, and advocate, and I'm so glad that you've chosen to join us today. Whether you're tuning in or catching the replay, this space is all about bringing real stories, diverse voices, and actionable insights to the surface. Because too often, those of us who experience the world differently are left out of the conversation. So today I have with me, as always, my amazing husband, Jeremy Brakefield, parent and advocate and co-host of this show. He always brings insight and warmth and lived experience to every conversation. Jeremy, take a moment and say hello.
Hello, I am Jeremy Brakefield, co-host of this fine show and Kingdom. Thank you.
We also have back with us tonight our wonderful co-host and friend Stone, who is a powerhouse of grounded insight and a creative mind with a sharp sense of humor, in my opinion. Stone always brings balance between our real talk and our wisdom, and we're so excited to have him back tonight. So welcome, Stone.
Thank you, Deanna. It is an honor to be back, and here it's a beautiful morning on the Gold Coast in Australia. I'm looking forward to diving into our topic.
And so speaking of our topic, we did have an absolutely wonderful guest lined up tonight, but something has come up and it doesn't seem like she's going to be able to join us. If we're lucky, she'll be able to pop in before we're through, but we're just going to move right along. And so today's episode is going to be, I think in my opinion, especially powerful. We're going to be talking about the sensory overload crisis and why this world wasn't built for the neurodivergent community for us. We're going to go deep into how overstimulation impacts neurodivergent can do to create environments that support us instead of working against us. So, opening thoughts, gentlemen. Not everybody at once.
So sorry for that. This is a really interesting topic because it's so subjective. And what I mean by that is that because we are in a spectrum, it doesn't occur to everyone in the same way, nor does it occur to everyone at the same time. It's contextual. For instance, loud noises may be really unpleasant and jarring, but loud noises in a different context can be okay. And each of us has a response, and we're not always taught how to document, how to index, how to basically have a sense of what is it that's activating us.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, part of what I'm hearing is like my husband and I, our diagnoses are different. The refrigerator humming in the background and the children screaming as they run through the house it doesn't necessarily overload me because I can filter it out, but it may immediately begin to trigger my husband just from the first moments of noise. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, exactly. Or it could be the same person. For instance, I had a client once who could not stand the sound of like a fire engine, or correction, not a fire engine, like a school fire alarm. So he had to keep the noise and attenuators on during those, otherwise he could become dysregulated. But at the same time, if he was listening to a fire engine or other emergency services on the television, that was fine. So very similar things, different context. but in one he could become dysregulated, and the other he wouldn't. So it was very interesting to come to terms with that and to try to find a solution that would make his life more functional.
Right. And so I think it's important that we do take a step back really quick and define what we're talking about, because you said, you talked about dysregulation, and what that means, from my understanding, is that one or more of our senses just become completely overwhelmed. And that throws us into a mental tailspin, essentially.
Well, it's a little like water when it starts to boil, and if you have too much water in the pot, it boils over. That energy has to go somewhere. And when you look at neurodiverse people, we don't experience the pruning, which is some of those neural connections being pruned after the age of 7. We tend to keep most of our connections, which means that we're going to have a different, more intense experience of our emotions, of our sensory perception. So all of our senses are a bit heightened.
Wait. So are you suggesting that this is a nervous system problem and we're not just being too sensitive?
It's not a nervous system problem. It is just it's the way we're designed. It's as simple as saying this person is from this cultural background, or this person is of this gender. So definitely not a problem. We are different in the way that our brains are wired, and so we need to be able to negotiate.
Keep going. I like it.
Well, I guess it's like if you're. I apologize for the crudeness. If you're a woman, you probably don't pee when you stand up. So neurodiverse people need to know. We need to be able to understand what our proclivities are, and because it's not something that's taught, we have to start to learn frameworks for how we can understand what works and what doesn't work in our life. And that's not the end of it. Then we need to do things such as be able to have the agency or empower someone else who can communicate on our behalf, so that we can start to organize our environment and work in a way that's going to be resourceful.
Okay. So, I mean, you're starting to talk about environments, and there's a lot of crossover in the topics that we talk about on this show, and we've talked about it many times that most spaces are not designed for the neurodivergent brain. Get into story.
And I don't want to say that it's our fault, but let's say I have a broken leg, and I'm not saying that there is anything amiss about being neurodivergent, but I'm just using this as an analogy. If I have a broken leg, it's probably not the best idea for me to go upstairs. And let's say I don't tell anyone that I have a broken leg. Let's say, for instance, that broken leg is not visible. It's still my responsibility to be able to communicate to people who are responsible, to those that are able to make a difference. It's my responsibility to communicate, hey, I got a broken leg, I can't use these stairs. Is there another way that I can get to the top?
Mm-hmm.
And in the same way that a lot of environments are not designed for us, we are socialized to not make a fuss, to not request that our needs be met. And so it's a double-edged sword.
No, I agree. I mean, regardless of what origins you blame, we live in a world where we want to fit in. We don't want to stand out in any capacity. We don't want to be seen as a problem. And so we just end up creating more problems for ourselves in the long run.
Yes. So the topic is so much more than just our sensitivities.
Right.
How do we determine what they are? And what do we do when we find out about it? And, do we get another, if we're in a job, say for instance, someone has sensitivities with the lights, fluorescent lights, what do they do? If their work environment is all fluorescent lights, do they have to move to a different floor? Or what if there isn't another floor? Do they have to get another job? Worked with some clients who were neurodivergent, and then once they divulged to their employer that they were neurodivergent, the employer found a way to let them go. So there are this topic is fraught with several issues, and each one needs to be, we need to be circumspect in the way that we deal with it.
I agree, but it brings up the problem of we are trying to build a world where we don't just fit in, we're at least partially understood so that we can cohabitate. And if we can't divulge our diagnoses, the accommodations that we think that we need in order to be comfortable, then we can never reach that point of whether you want to call it equity or equality is irrelevant. We can never reach that point.
Because we've got to
Yes.
for the understanding. Because the thing is that I believe that there is a connotation out there that when you start talking about your needs, it's a matter of you're wanting to be special. You're wanting them to bend over back. At the end of the day, no, it's just you need them to understand. For you to function at peak efficiency, you need these particular things met. And it's important to get that understanding of yourself, and then you have to get that understanding to your employer. Or maybe I'm just a little too far out there. I don't know.
Well, it's a nice sentiment that we should, but that's not the reality that we live in, and it's unfortunate. The number of times that I've worked with my clients to be able to start their own business because the employers that they've worked for have not been accommodating, or they haven't sufficiently accommodated their needs. It happens all the time, and
it's a staggering number.
Yeah, and so it's not a circumstance of what's fair and what's not. That's the reality that we live in, and so being able to change it, we need to have our being able to make a difference in our own environments, which is to say we need to create our own environments if we're going to have some type of control. The whole world hears about what's happening in the United States, where I believe they got rid of funding, the government stopped funding DEI projects. So, that's an example that we're not in control.
I mean, that's true. And we're not even in control. Like, this is going to sound like a strange segue, but we don't even necessarily know what's going to trigger us until we've been triggered the first time.
Yes, exactly. What happens to an adolescent? Maybe they've had parents who've been working with them their whole lives, helping them to be safe, helping them be nurtured, and then when they leave the nest, they go out. They go to university for the first time, or they have a job for their first time. Again, the world is not made for us, and sometimes that can be quite challenging.
That's my biggest fear as a parent is I've got an 18-year-old, I've got it's about to be 16-year-old, a 23-year-old, and that's my biggest concern is that I've got to try and prepare them not for how the world should be, but for how the world actually is. That they've got to understand that the way we think is not the way everyone else thinks. And you've got to understand going out there that you've got to meet them on their terms. As horrible as that is, that's just the reality of the world we live in.
That's a fantastic segue in our conversation. So what are some of the things that you're doing to prepare your children?
For the most part, for us, I think it's really important for them to try to develop a strong, what I call extrapolation skills, where you can look at the situation around you and see what's going on, and not just see the surface of what's going on, but hopefully even look to the underneath. Granted, me and my wife, we've got a little bit of psychology knowledge to kind of add to that, that I hope that they will take the extra step to get that as well. But it's just that aspect of thinking, not just taking everything at face value, but actually taking the time to think through each moment, and not just take the world at face value.
So I think I'm hearing that you're teaching them to be circumspect, and rather than making a judgment about what they observe, to develop some skills in objectivity, so that they can have multiple contexts or multiple perspectives at once.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, in the short and simple of it, it's teaching them about communication, that asking questions isn't just okay, it's required. Otherwise, you can never come to understanding.
And do you also have a circumstance where you're teaching them about how they ask questions? Because in a lot of environments, when questions are asked, it's perceived as a challenge.
Oh yeah, no, completely. Unfortunately, no. The short answer to that is no, because I'm trying to express to my kids that you have to push for change, and one of the changes that their generation should strive for is that questions are no longer seen as a sin.
Okay. Yeah. So that is a difference in our generations. Not across the board, of course, but it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. So you're teaching them how to ask questions, how to be more objective in their environments, and what are some of the other things that you're teaching them? And the reason why I want to cover this topic in this direction is because I believe it gives context to our listeners, because they might be saying, yeah, of course, I do feel more sensitive about other people, about my environments, but I don't know what to do about it. And so this is a great conversation on some different tactics and strategies that other people use.
Well, obviously at every age you have to take a slightly different approach, because the mental development is different at every age. But it starts really when they're, my older kids call them three-nagers. So about the time that they're 2 or 3 years old, you start teaching them that it is okay to have big emotions, but it is not okay to melt down. And you have to learn to say what is bothering you.
Oh, yeah. That's fantastic. And how is that working?
We only really had one child that really, really struggled with the concept of voicing what was actually bothering him and digging into it.
And everyone else is fine with that.
Okay, so obviously all of our children are very, very different, because they all have different diagnoses, they all have different personalities, they all have different sensory issues. We've got some that have problems with noise, and others that have problems with food and smells. It's really is a spectrum in our house. So for me, it's always felt like a really good example. It's just very, very micro. And so that number one is always figuring out how to voice what is bothering you. Because if you can't tell somebody what is bothering you, then how can you expect them to try to change?
And I think it also comes from that all of the children were raised slightly differently. Because what we know now is not now what it was when Shane was a toddler. There are a lot of things that we have learned over the past 20 years where we have refined things little by little. because
experience is the best teacher.
Because when you take the way, because with her, I can honestly say that she has taken the aspect of what we teach with the not letting your emotions overcome you and actually being able to express yourself while in your anger and everything. I think that she has done the best of it. Like, I've seen like full grown adults that can't control themselves as well as this at the time 2.5 year old. She's almost 4 now, but even back then she would start to get upset and we could tell her, okay, take a breath, and she could stop and she would literally breathe through it. I mean, it was an amazing thing to watch.
I would remind you though that when it comes to our older children, they only had you and I for examples, and we weren't great examples at the time. And our younger children have an entire family worth of people that have embodied these principles.
Right. It's that refinement of the process.
And we've totally left Stone out of this conversation at this point. I'm so sorry.
No, this is fantastic. It's interesting that you're talking about some of the things that you brought up for your children. What about yourselves? What are you noticing possibly could be a gap in your sensitivities? For instance, is there an environment that you go in that you know is a challenge, and how do you manage that? And you're surprised? And what do you do when you're surprised?
Me personally, if I find myself in a situation where I'm surprised and I'm overwhelmed, and for me, my thing is always the same. It's stop. You're getting overstimulated. You're about to blow your stack. You gotta stop. You are in control of yourself. The sensory cannot come in if you don't let it. And this runs through the back of my head. Sometimes I will close my eyes. Sometimes I'll even extend my hands out in front of me, and I'll just take some deep breaths. But once I do that, and once I basically shut off everything, I can come back to a point where I can then re-engage with the exact same thing that was starting to overstimulate me, but now I'm ready for it. Now I'm prepared. And for me, that feels like a massive difference.
Yeah, that is huge. Deanna, what about yourself?
We've kind of talked about this before. I'm one of those that almost has multiple different personalities. And so when I find myself in a situation that is beyond my control, that I've been surprised with what's going on, I'm starting to become overstimulated, I go into what I call crisis mode, which is a very specific way that my brain operates that detaches from the emotion in the moment. I'm going to feel every single bit of that, but it's going to come later when I can process it. Does that make any sense whatsoever?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it's good that you're able to articulate and notice it.
That also came with experience. When I was a younger woman, I didn't recognize what that was, and then I would burn out through the process of it and have a total shutdown when it was over, instead of processing what I went through.
Yeah, that also brings up a really important point in that ignoring these sensory overloads. Just what is this? Having a stiff upper lip and just pushing through it. Yeah, that the pushing through it, it doesn't work, and it can lead to more problems.
Well, I've often looked at it like it's like a septic system almost, where on a normal day there's a certain amount of output and the system can handle it. When you start to get overwhelmed, the system starts to back up. And ultimately what happens when the septic system backs up is the stuff comes back out everywhere. And we're kind of the same way. If we allow ourselves to get to the point where the system completely overloads, we spew all over everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. It's that's a perfect analogy.
Excuse my crudeness.
Yeah. Oh no, that I at some point I might use that analogy because it's so apt.
But just like a good septic system, you should have pressure relief valves built in, ways that you can bring yourself down or remove yourself from the problem so it doesn't back up. And that's kind of what we're talking about, is recognizing when we hit those points and what to do when it happens.
It would be so useful if there were professionals that we could rely on that could help us navigate these and come to frameworks.
I'm trying not to bust out laughing over here. You mean that those fantasy heroes that we just wish actually exist? I mean, you're right. But then that comes to the issue of so many of us, one of the things that causes our overload ourselves into stressful, unfamiliar environments with strangers. And when you seek professional help, you are having to do exactly that. Put yourself into an unfamiliar environment with a stranger.
Yes, and there are some strangers who are aware of that, and they offer virtual sessions.
So what I'm hearing is something good did come out of COVID, in the fact that now that we have access to all of these virtual tools, we can use those to accommodate some of those proclivities.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I did that when especially through, it's good you mentioned COVID because that was the situation that made this available. I moved from seeing one-on-one clients to only doing group. And I've recently turned on an education process because I noticed that a lot of the group clients, they go to the webinars and they go to the group virtual meetings, but they were only engaged at that time. They didn't really engage throughout the week. And so what I did is I took a diploma of counseling curriculum, and I put that as the sticky content or the glue that keeps the community together. And so now the entire community is learning these tools so that they can not only support themselves, but they can support other people who are coming up as well.
Okay, that is an absolutely amazing thing. So how would people that are listening get more information about what you're talking about?
Well, they can contact me on LinkedIn. G is spelled G-Y-E. By the way, I was not attempting to make a plug for what I'm doing. It's more embodying or giving an example of things that can work. Absolutely. Because when we're supporting one another from a community perspective, then the things that we learn, the things that we experience, we have a deepening of that experience. And this is one of the challenges of being neurodiverse, is the isolation that can come with it.
Let's be blunt, that often comes with it.
Yes, quite so.
Something else that also needs to be said, that needs to be put out there for neurodivergent people like us, is when somebody drops something like that could be a tool, just because it's some sort of a business thing, that's not something to immediately discredit. Because a tool that works is a tool that works. It doesn't matter where you get it from.
Agreed.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, both of you are so amazing. This show is a blessing because it gives people an opportunity to listen to and create their own narrative rather than letting society do that. Still, the DSM is saying that neurodiversity is a disorder, and it's not a disorder. It's just different.
This is a conversation that Jeremy and I have quite often, because by labeling it a disorder, you are automatically calling it a disability, therefore it's a liability, and in reality, everybody on this conversation knows that while there are inherent liabilities that we can learn to overcome, being neurodiverse is, and I know you hate this, Stone, but it's a superpower. It gives us a viewpoint that no one else has.
Yes, it does, and that's not a good or bad thing. It's just how it shows up, and it's sad that employers don't recognize that. I mean, if I were, well, actually, I'm not a good example because all the people I engage tend to be neurodiverse. But if I were a neurotypical person who had a business, I'd be looking to hire as many neurodiverse people as I could, because I'm going to get that difference, and I'm also going to get people who have a hyper focus about the things that they're working on. It's from a business speak perspective, the USB. It's a competitive advantage.
I agree, and unfortunately, a lot of what they're seeing is, like you mentioned this earlier on in the hour, people disclose to their employers that they're neurodiverse, and suddenly they're seen as emotionally unstable or a liability to the company, and they try to cut them free instead of utilizing them.
And at the end of the day,
I think.
Go ahead.
I don't think either one of you have had that situation because you've always been self-employed. Is that right?
No, Jeremy has been a part of the workforce his entire adult life, except for the first 2 years of our company when he left his job to help me myself. That is correct.
but I will say this: my work history is very, very checkered. Up until the one job that I'm currently at now, I rotated through jobs constantly. I have the moniker of telling people I'm the only person I know that got fired because the boss didn't have any clue who I was. Because he called me into his office and in the middle of firing me, starts talking about how he knows who I was, that I worked for this one company, and he just continued rambling, and I never worked for that company, so I don't know who he was firing, but I lost my job either way.
So many variations in that story of us of them just looking for an opportunity to get rid of us because we're different.
Well, I can say, having watched the majority of his professional career, almost every problem that he has ever had with an employer stemmed from his inability to communicate his neurodivergent needs correctly. Whether that be he didn't give them the information that they wanted, or he over extrapolated a task that they asked him to do with minimal input from them. Over and over, it's the same narrative that plays out.
And so what have been the differences with this new employer? And this is just so that the listeners can hear what you've done differently with this employer compared to the ones in the past.
Really and truly, it was the place. It was a car dealership that had gotten started back in like the 1950s down here. And so the department that I went into, it was a group of guys that had all been working together for like 30 to 50 years. Like the amount of experience that we had in our particular department, we had like 250, 300 years of experience of guys that had been there. And so I stepped into this massively family environment where it's all you really have to do is try and show you're trying, and they're going to back you up, because it was everybody pulling for everybody. It was a really, really unique employment environment to step into.
So there was a cultural advantage where people were looking after one another.
Yes.
Okay. And let's reverse engineer this a little bit. Let's say that you were the employer. What are some of the attributes that you would want to have in your organization that would enable neurodiverse people to be able to thrive?
My thought process is you have to.
Because you've seen what works and you see what doesn't work, and you probably have some ideas on specifically how to specifically answer the question.
Thing is that there's not a cookie cutter on this. Because we're all neurodivergent, it's a matter of you have to figure out where the pieces are going to fit. It's like a massive puzzle, but this puzzle was not pre-assembled and pre-cut. This is a puzzle of you have a massive amount of puzzle pieces. You have to find the ones that are going to interlock to create what it is you're trying to do. And if you will do that and you will assemble it with neurodivergent individuals, you will be amazed at what it will produce. But you've got to give that space that maybe this little configuration is not going to fit. And so you're going to have to shift something. You have to be accustomed to the artifice of deviation.
From the outside looking in, as he's experienced this, my perspective says that the main difference between the environments that work for us and the ones that don't is the ones that do, they treat each other like family members. They care about each other. They're involved in one another's real lives, versus the ones that don't work. Everything is about the bottom line. It's about the profit margin. And so you become a number on a spreadsheet and no longer a person.
Okay, so the environments where employees are looked at, are treated as assets, or a unit of productivity, that might not be the best place for someone who's neurodivergent to operate from. Whereas is it possible for that type of environment to be available in a government role?
That's a tricky question, and I'm not sure that it could, the way that governments are currently structured.
Because of bureaucracy in general, I don't think it can. Because bureaucracy in general kind of requires the same thing of each individual person, and that kind of that more or less is almost antithesis to what we want to create, where each individual person is weak, somebody else steps in to fill the gap.
Just thinking about the circumstance of I knew people in America who they wanted to get into jobs that had longevity. For instance, they'd want to work at the post office, or these types of roles where you're doing a similar thing every day, and hopefully that thing can't be replaced by a machine. Which is interesting, because there are quite a few neurodivergent people who are quite happy doing the same thing. I know for myself, I wear the same clothes, and so I have multiple sets of the same things, same shirts, same shoes, same slacks, and I tend to eat the exact same thing every day. I prefer not to have deviation from that, because it doesn't make sense to me. It's too many things to compute. So it would be interesting to understand if there are these type of government roles that could have that type of environment. But I hear what you're saying, that maybe it can't exist because of the nature of what it is to work in the government.
I like the way that you put that.
But that also gives me a thought. That being said, if one were to set up a governmental department based on that idea, and so under those strictures, had everyone of a particular mind frame in a particular work status, that could work.
Okay, but now I feel like you're talking about limiting people's roles based on their neural profile.
Not exactly, but it's okay, what kind of a job do you want to work? Do you want to work a 9 to 5? Do you want to work a 7 to 11? Do you want to work a whatever? And for different people with one having different efficiency ranges of when they function best. If you were to have something where you had 3 different departments that each function on a different time schedule so that they could still have uniformity across a smaller subsection, then you could do something along those lines. But because bureaucracy, everything has to be cookie cutter, you have to confine it down to a smaller
This is
area.
not where I saw this conversation going today. Okay.
Expected. I mean, we're neurodiverse. What can you expect?
I will admit I am an analytical. If you hand me a Rubik's Cube, I will solve it.
On that note, but I mean, like, okay, so we're talking about which you and I have had conversations about this dream community that you want to build, and so these conversations are relevant in that context because we're talking about what actually works for us versus what we've been forced to experience.
Yeah, it's the other element that we don't tend to address is that a lot of us are raised in this neurotypical environment, and so we do, whether we think we are or not, we do take on internalized ableism attributes.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't go away just because we say, oh, that doesn't impact us. It's silent. It operates in the ego. It operates in the trauma centers, and
Subconscious.
I mean, I've used this example for other things, but it's like my very rough relationship that was physical with my mother. Does that mean I never wanted to touch my children out of anger? Does that mean I've never struck one of them out of anger? No. Does it mean it's happened far less and I anticipate that my grandchildren will never experience it? Yes. You carry every behavior that you've learned. It's almost impossible to get rid of them.
I think what I'm alluding to is that there is a requisite for us to have a higher level of self-awareness than everyone else, because we're constantly translating different environments as well as ourselves. For us to have the community, the bespoke community that we've spoken of in the past, there's a higher standard of performance required. And when I say performance, I'm talking about the relationships that we're committed to building.
I can completely agree. It can't be a passive role within the community. Everyone has to be actively engaged in themselves and those around them.
Yeah. I think it would be a mistake if we said, hey, we get a piece of land and everyone builds their house and we're all in this, gated community. And I'm using that as an analogy. Where it's only neurodiverse people and we expect that everyone's going to get along. No, we have to have structures in place so that we embody the idea. We can't take it for granted, and that's what happens in neurotypical land. They build systems because they think it's a great idea. They don't take on cultural awareness attributes. And a lot of the systems that are built are homogenous for a particular culture, which is weird, especially for a country like America or the UK or Australia, which are very diverse. But they don't think, hey, we should design systems that are culturally aware. We just build them for one group.
Well, I mean, we are also talking about systems that, are several hundred years old and were designed in an era when technically on the books and in the diagnosis, we didn't exist yet.
Yes.
Well, I believe it also goes back to something that me and Stone have talked about on here, is the whole industrialization. Because everybody has to play a role in the industrial machine for it to function. So if somebody isn't functioning like a cog in the wheel, then they're a nail that needs to be hammered down. There's something that needs to be replaced. Pre-industrialization, we had the ability to find our places to fit in. But once that became the standard,
Well, now we're talking in a circle because now we're back to talking about building the places where we fit in.
Yeah, well, that happens. We want to fit in, but how can we fit in a system that isn't designed for us? So let's build our own system.
And it's
A hybrid model. Yeah, I have colleagues that are doing just that, building these hybrid models that I'm very excited to be a part of and to know about and to be able to contribute to.
Would you mind talking about that a little bit? I'm not sure how much you can.
Yeah, I can't. It's still
okay, that's fine.
It's still proprietary, and it is happening in your country. So we'll have to wait for a little.
Watch the news. Exciting things are on the horizon.
Exactly.
Excellent.
But in the interim, we were bringing this back to the real world and what people are experiencing today. Lord, I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but it's all about self-awareness and communication.
Exactly. I can't, I suppose I'm biased because I'm a counselor, but I can't stress enough how important it is to work with professionals that can help you unpack these things. When I was younger, I saw no need for mental health professionals. I just thought it was hocus pocus. But it really does help because you have someone who's objective, who's not really connected to your personal experience, and so they're able to have that. I wouldn't say detached, but they're able to have an objectivity that can give you a different mirror. It's essential, and even if someone only goes for a few sessions in Australia, they have a circumstance where everyone receives, I believe, 8 to 10 mental health sessions per year, and if the circumstances call for it, they're able to get up to 20, and these are complementary. This is just part of the healthcare system.
Wow. Okay. So that's definitely a standard that the U.S. could look towards instead of defunding things.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily, I know this is my ADHD showing, I'm not necessarily opposed to defunding as long as those funds are used to found something more beneficial and useful than what it was originally there. But it doesn't look like that's the plan currently.
Yeah. Just laugh because the challenges that the U.S. has are bigger than making a choice about whether its citizenry can or cannot have medical care.
I don't disagree with that. We definitely don't have time to dig into it, but I don't disagree with it.
Yeah. Oh, let's summarize some of the things that we've come up with. We've identified that the sensory proclivities of neurodiverse people, that it is a spectrum, that we can't say that this particular person is going to have this experience or not, and that each person needs to be able to identify what their sensory proclivities are. Once they've identified them, they need to be able to communicate them in an effective way where they can make a difference. Then we went into choosing the appropriate environment, because not all environments are going to accept that a neurodiverse person is going to have different needs. And then we went off on several other tangents, which
Small tangents.
which are relevant, but there were a lot. So does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think the only thing that we haven't covered is the fact that while sensory overload can lead to mental health issues, it is not a mental health issue, it's an awareness issue.
Exactly right, full marks. It is. Which also, it's also useful to point out that just because someone is neurodiverse, it does not mean that they're going to have mental health issues. I think being alive can be a traumatic experience, and depending on the support that one grows up with, whether they have it or they don't have it, that can introduce trauma, which can produce some type of mental health inequities. by itself does not mean that someone is going to have mental health challenges. So, yep, you nailed it.
Okay, Jeremy, any last thoughts before we wrap up for the
Me, one of the things that I think has helped me is reading philosophy. But I don't think we have enough time to get into that, but just wanted to throw that out there.
So, in other words, if I can rephrase that, seeking diverse perspectives to figure out your own.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay, well.
Dictionary code, it's a code that I wrote that is a mashup of Stoicism, the art of war, several indigenous ancient philosophies. I'm going to send that to you guys. It also has a workbook, and I'd love to get your feedback if it's something that resonates with you.
Okay, I think that sounds like a great plan. Well, I've absolutely enjoyed today's conversation. I think we've gotten some really great. Next week, we will be talking about diagnosis or discovery, reclaiming your identity through a neurodivergent lens. So basically, we're going to get to start touching on some of those. Well, now you know, what does that actually change, and what does the future look like? And I think it's going to be a really great conversation. We should have the amazing Sam Farmer with us next week. Anything last thoughts or sign out before we go, Stone?
No, but I will have a link to my book, which is Navigating Your Autism Diagnosis. I'll have that available, and all of our listeners will be able to download that for free.
Excellent. We appreciate that. All right, well, then we will see everyone same time, place next week. This has been another episode of Neurodivergent News. See you later.
You got control.